In pulling apart this book, so I want to learn how to write story. Now, one thing I've learned about learning how to learn is that you strip it back to its elements and its fundamentals and those things. You get back to the base. You always got to get to the base. Everyone wants to get up the chain, but what I've learned is you've got to get to the base first. And then you've got to understand and you've got to work with the base and the building blocks. It's like I trained Kung Fu for 8 years. And it's the push-ups, kicks and punches, the meat and potato stuff that you have to perfect. Why is that? Because it's not the advanced stuff. It's never the advanced stuff. It's always the stuff. Becoming exceptional and extraordinary something is doing simple things extraordinarily well. So with these, I said, okay, this particular book that my intuition found and guided me to is called Story Grid, and it's freaking amazing. Now, it's about the architecture of story and about pulling apart all those things, the fundamental elements and all this stuff of story. And the more I dig into these things and pull these parts out, and the more attuned I get to it, be able to tell story and understand story. Story is internal narrative. We're all living a story. This is a story, life is a story. So when you study story, you study people, and there's those fundamental building blocks of you're studying the reality, because the reality is just a story. And I know that seems deep and mystical, but it is, because then when you look at all these fundamental elements, like I said, and being someone who's across all these different disciplines, like I've studied at least 5 or 6 different disciplines, you start to see all these elements in that this is the human condition projecting itself onto reality, in that if it's true throughout, and it's true on all time frames. It has that elemental component. So what I'm endeavoring to do with conveying these things is, one, inspiring people to go and follow their inspiration, their intuitive guide, and just keep learning. Don't worry about how long your unknowns material list is on the side. It doesn't matter. It'll sort itself out. You'll find your answers just purely because they're in there. And two is don't underestimate yourself, and never let the fact you don't know what you're doing. Now, I'm piling in and learning about story, and like I said, is stories really, and pulling all these things apart. Story and our own internal story and our own version of reality is, these are all very fundamental to that understanding. It's like a form of therapy, because as we learn to pull things out and write all this stuff down and draw these things out of ourselves, we're getting this chance within ourselves to go back and relive our own journey and integrate and bring to the surface those steps in our own journey. And the ability to transcend ourselves and the ability to become conscious and transcend ourselves requires us to pull out and extract all those things and put them on the table for our journey in ourself. And this is our journey, our tree of life, is to examine that and understand that in order for us to transcend self, we need to come to a place where we're loving and grateful for all those things within our journey. And now the only way we can do that is by pulling these things back to the surface and examining how we feel about them. And the truth is, if we feel, angry, shame, whatever about parts of that journey, we need to do the reconciliations on those things to incorporate and integrate those things into ourselves, to take ourselves to that transcended level of transcending self. It's onto the expansion, because in order to achieve the next level, we have to expand our perception of ourself to that level. And how we expand ourselves to that level is by integrating and coming to a peaceful place of loving gratitude for all those building blocks that went into creating who we currently are. And once we're at peace, you see what happens at a deeper level is, if we're not at peace, they're actually energetic drains that become these filters or blockages to what we can perceive. And our perceived abilities at that level are blocked and hindered by what we believe about ourselves. So in liberating and coming back to a place of self-love and a place of unconditional acceptance of self and those things in the journey, eliminating all those charges around shame and guilt and those things that we carry as blockages, when we eliminate those things, we can see a new potential for ourselves, and we can expand into that new reality of that higher consciousness, higher transcendent awareness. From we're transcending because we've come to master ourself at this level. And you can only transcend something you've come to master. And in order to master self, you have to extrapolate all these things out and do the clearance work to clarify and unblock your energy potential to have the frequency, the energy required, and remove the blockages to the perception of ourself, expanded into that new reality. Like, I'll give you an example. If I said to you, who is the billion dollar you? And I don't mean the bank, just the bank account. I mean the $1 billion. If you list out all the elements of self-mastery and say, who is the person at that level, the you, that has mastered all of those things? I don't mean you're aware of them. I mean, you've mastered them. You've confronted them. You live it, you breathe it. Whatever that mastery defined is for you, whatever is the hardest possible things for you to do, you've mastered them. You are in the cause, not in the effect. You are the master, not the slave of those things. So if that person seems a long way away, that's because there's these things blocking, hindering, distorting your perception of where you are and where it is, because of those reconciliations you haven't done from your journey in your story. So pulling out your story and understanding this fundamental structure of story, it's a process of therapy, of integration, of pulling those things out. Now, if there's things there that come out that you don't have a way to reconcile, to saying, okay, well, how do I process this and get through this? This is really traumatic. What helped me massively, like what the answer was for me, was Dr. Demartini has a method of balancing perception, and that's the method I used. Highly recommend it. There's probably others, but those things and incorporating those things to liberate those blockages and the major one, do the major ones first, help you along that journey. And then you too can draw out from your studies and your learnings and write your story, because your story is the fruits of your tree, and absorbing and becoming unconditional of your story is what helps you liberate yourself from it. Actually step back from it, because you are not your story. If you are emotionally tied to your story because you have those traumas and all those things emotionally tying you to it, you are still stuck in your story. To do that work and to liberate yourself of that and your story, to draw it out, extrapolate it, understand it, love it unconditionally, means you can then step back from it, transcend self, and step back from it and say, now I'm the captain of my destiny and my future's in my hands. I'm no longer a victim of this history. I'm no longer carrying these things with me. I'm no longer that story. That story's on the page now. It's out there. It's on there. It's not me. It's the things I experienced, but it's shaped my experiences, but it's not me. And that once you step back from self like that, that's the spiritual evolution of the waking up and the transcending self and all those things. This is where the work's at. And this is why I love pursuing knowledge from the higher self, because when the higher self guides me and I pay attention to my intuitive guide to what's next and what's next, all of these things come out like an unfolding, like a flower, one petal at a time. Just this thing just keeps opening up. And I would say peel the onion back, but the onion doesn't really have the right connotation. It's more of a flower, and here you are, if flowering into your authentic being by pursuing of these things and by following your inspiration and your internal guides, and being willing to go on those journeys and excited to go on those journeys. So I hope all that makes sense, and I will be sharing my progressive journey along the way. I'll be going back to build these things out. I have a credo of my brother's teacher. So I'll go back, I'll start from a semblance of what I believe is the beginning, and just in my educational stuff and what I've learned, and the building blocks of what I've learned and how I've learned it, how my guides have taught me, and I'll lay all that out, and do these shorter videos, and I'll make them more succinct and more structured, and have the usual bits and pieces, so that they're successful on YouTube. But anyway, stay with us. I'll share this stuff as long as we go. I get really pumped. It's fucking amazing stuff. So I love it, and I'll see you on the next one.